Слава Україні!
Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic night and has had a wonderful and relaxing Saturday, and I also hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe, and if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's been a ton of stuff that has happened over the last 24 hours, some of which happened not very long after we ended the stream last night, and so we'll be catching up with all of that today, as well as many other things that are taking place in Ukraine and throughout the rest of the world, as we talk about the very many crises and big events ongoing throughout the world on tonight's stream. And of course, there's a reason that we're doing this. It's not just to report on the news, but it's to help people throughout the world that are affected by these crises. In fact, here on the new news, we pride ourselves in being the news that gives back, meaning that we give back directly to the people affected by these crises. If you go and you check out the video description, you're going to see a ton of different organizational links, and you're going to see a ton of them down there that cover all sorts of places throughout the world, including, of course, Ukraine, which is the hot topic right now in the news. And so you can go down there and support any of those organizations or fundraisers. It's stuff that we have gone through and vetted ourselves to make sure that it's safe for you, and that 80% or more of the proceeds all of these organizations and fundraisers receive go directly to their programs and directly to helping people. Here on the new news, we're never going to be doing super chats. We're never going to be merchandising. We're never going to be monetizing these videos. 100% of everything we always will do is going to go directly towards these organizations and helping people throughout the world affected by this. We are always going to be 100% charity driven, and that will always be our mission. So if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Please help us grow this channel, grow the amount of people that come here, because the more people that are here and come and enjoy the news the way we do it, the more of an impact we will have overall. So thank you very much for the support you've already given us, and if you can, give us a like, subscribe, let your friends know about us, click that bell, share it amongst your communities, your friends and family, and of course you can follow and share our stuff on Twitter as well. And with that, before we jump into the news here, I am watching the live chat, as I am every night that we are live, and I highly encourage you to ask questions and make comments. I do watch this, and I will try to answer and respond to those comments and questions throughout the entirety of this news stream as we're kind of going through here, because I understand a lot of these situations, especially geopolitical situations and war zones, can be rather complicated, and I would love to be able to answer those questions you guys may have. To give you a little bit of a background on myself, so I served as an O-352 anti-tank missileman in the United States Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020 with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, and I went to Syria between October of 2017 and March of 2018, where like I said, I deployed to Syria, and I also spent about a month and a half in Kuwait when I was there on my first tour. And then during my second tour overseas, I once again went with 2-7, and I was in charge of the Javelin anti-tank team that was with the Crisis Response Company in Kuwait. I trained Saudi Arabian Marines, and then I was also one of the 100 Marines that deployed to the Baghdad embassy compound on New Year's of 2020 to respond to the protests that are ongoing there, where I oversaw anti-armor operations for the Javelin, or for my Javelin team, and overall the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad, Iraq. So my special commander expertise rely on anti-armor warfare and armored doctrine. I'm also a fully cross-trained machine gunner, a CLS Marine. I am also a fully cross-trained rifleman and a partially cross-trained radio operator. So I can talk quite extent on different types of operations militarily, but even outside of that, I attempt to remain well-rounded and knowledgeable in other things such as history, geopolitics, economics, and other situations throughout the world to try and diversify my knowledge base. So I will try to answer all questions no matter what the topic is, but if I don't know the answer, I simply will tell you as such, because I'm not an expert in everything. I have a very small set of expertise, but I always implore you as a viewer to do your own research of any of these topics. There's something that you find interesting or you want to delve deeper into, regardless of if I am an expert or not. Please do not believe everything you hear on the internet. And with that, we jump right into the news, and of course we jump right into Ukraine, where we do not have any news coming out of Kyiv. And we jump over here and into the Kharkiv area. And we already have a question coming from Ed Kelly regarding the bridge, and asking for my opinion on it. I will get to that when we get to the bridge. So hold that question, and I will respond to it when we actually get to that segment of the news. And but first, we start off, unfortunately, over here in Kupiansk, where, unfortunately, we're getting some pretty terrible news. Tortured bodies were found in Kupiansk and Veslovy, where tortured bodies of 4 more Ukrainians were found in the newly liberated village of Kupiansk, Veslovy. And what we see is this was informed by the Ukrainian police. These were a 73-year-old, a 71-year-old, 49-year-old woman, and 49-year-old women, and a 27-year-old man. These images are a little graphic, but they were blurred. But they were able to recover these tortured bodies here. So we move over here and into the Luhansk Oblast. We're seeing that Stelmanivka was liberated. Ukrainian troops were posting pictures in front of the administrative building plaque of Stelmanivka, which indicates that they are in this area and have in fact captured Stelmanivka. Once again, showing another push into the Luhansk Oblast. We have another one down here into the south near Makivka, which is where we were updating yesterday. And we're seeing another one up here in the north. So we're seeing them really pushing through the Kharkiv Oblast at this point and really pushing around these Russian forces and really diving deeper as these lines are collapsing for the Russians under a lot of stress from a lot of different angles, logistically and just tactically there on the ground. And we're going to kind of see that this group more or less seems to be pushing more towards Sabotage. I'm sorry, my pronunciation is really, really terrible, but Sabotage down here in the south, where reportedly Russian forces are trying to reinforce these positions and are trying to build a new defensive line. We do not know how viable that will be, no, but it's something that we're currently hearing, at least from the Russian side, is this is where Russian forces are being transferred to, and this is where we're seeing a lot of them falling back to and building a new defensive line in and around this area to try and stop this counterattack using a quantity over quality perspective. They know their troops aren't as good, but they can muster more troops and push them into the fight within this specific sector. How effective that will be remains to be seen. Down here in the south, this is in Zaporizhzhia, which was liberated not too long ago. And what we see out of here is that there was a... Oh, sorry, I did not even show the photos for this one. Sorry, guys. So what we see up here, and there they are in front of the plaque. But as we jump down here into Seversk, what we see, unfortunately, is the reburial of individuals that were found in this area. Ukrainian forces and Ukrainian police officers and authorities continue to find a lot of tortured victims and just victims in general of essentially massacres while under Russian occupation. these people are being reburied. They have already been, they've already been identified. Their bodies have been investigated, and they're now receiving a proper burial here in Zaporizhzhia, which is located in the Donetsk Oblast, one of the first cities recaptured as these counteroffensives have been taking place. And this has been reported by Pavlo Krylenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. This is coming from his official Twitter. So these are the reburials of those killed while under Russian occupation here in the Donetsk Oblast. Take a look.
Святий Боже, святий кріпкий, святий безсмертний, помилуй нас.
Ми знаходимося в місті Святогірськ на кладовищі, де після ексгумації, проведення заходів щодо ідентифікації та інших експертиз 21 тіло буде перепоховано. Це тіла цивільних осіб, які загинули під час ворожих обстрілів і мають різні тілесні ушкодження, осколкові та інші.
So that is the reburial of individuals that were killed under Russian occupation after their bodies have been investigated. They are continuing to find more and more bodies of individuals in Lyman, Zaporizhzhia, and all throughout these liberated areas. And unfortunately, it's been assessed that this is only the beginning. Bucha as well was really only the beginning. There is definitely likely more to come, unfortunately, and I'm sure we'll see much more of this as we get into areas such as Lysychansk, Severodonetsk, Melitopol, Mariupol, and of course Kherson. We also get a daily Donetsk update coming from Pavlo Krylenko. Quote, on October the 7th, number of victims of Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 15, 17 injured. And that's coming from his official Twitter here as well, where he gives us that update every day. And we can see at this point, without including the cities of Volnovakha and Mariupol within the Donetsk Oblast so far, 961 Ukrainian civilians have been killed and 2,347 have been injured here within the Donetsk Oblast, and that number continues to rise every day. And this is since the 24th of February, the start of the invasion. This does not include prior to this. Kharkovo was shelled quite significantly, and we see that the Ukrainian city of Kharkovo here was shelled by Russian forces, inflicting at least 3 injuries and 1 death, and damaging 6 high-rise buildings and destroying 1 home, which is already previously damaged in another shelling incident prior to this one. We can see some of the damage coming from these buildings here. Russia continues to shell these areas pretty harshly. Even though there is no real military advantage at this point, and within this area, we're still seeing high levels of Russian bombardment.
Групою приїздили до цього будинку. Тут роздавали людям гуманітарну допомогу та вмовляли людей виїхати. Невеличкий прильот посікло вхідні двері під'їзду. Тоді люди не постраждали, але з неділю назад відбулось влучання. Будинок загорівся, провалило декілька поверхів, загинула цивільна особа. Постраждали були діти та інші цивільні. Людину, яка загинула, тут намагались відкопати близько 2 діб. У будинку мешкало близько 30 осіб.
Meanwhile, just across the front lines here in the city of Donetsk, while everyone's been talking about the bridge, other big things have been happening. This is a rather large blaze that was taking place here in Donetsk, reportedly at a Russian logistical warehouse, which makes sense. We've seen that Ukrainian forces have been striking at logistical facilities across Ukraine, even deep behind enemy lines in places where artillery originally were not able to reach. We're seeing these done mostly with the HIMARS and the M270 Mars 2 systems, fire high precision rockets and missiles into these regions. These are accurate up to and including 1 meter, meaning it will put a missile between me and the camera that I'm actually talking to you now. So it's very, very, very accurate. It's very well on target. And these systems, the Excalibur round is accurate within 4 meters, meaning in a very similar pace. It'll put a missile or put an artillery shell between me and the door behind me to enter the room. So it's extremely accurate. We're seeing these being used extremely effectively against Russian logistical infrastructure, including here in the downtown heart of Donetsk. Take a look.
Вы, папа, и слышали.
Так а я за что и говорю, блин, это надо домой текать, наверное.
Это, говорит, склады ниже колбасного.
Вот вы, папа, и
And that remains a theme. The targeting of logistical infrastructure will remain a theme for quite a while. And we even see it as we move down here. This is in Andriivka. This is specifically here. This is the Kauron station in Andriivka, sorry, which is located right here. And this is where a Russian logistical hub was. As you can see, there's a rail line that runs through here. Most Russian logistics are pushed via rail. They can move a large quantity of equipment, manpower, and supplies on rail lines. And so a lot of these stops, including here at Andriivka, which is only 50 kilometers from Mariupol, was also struck, and it was a very successful strike. And it's a very much, very well, you can tell that this is an ammunition depot, and it is currently going up, and it's made quite a big boom. Take a look.
А чё нас оттуда, вас откуда-то? Или туда ракеты летят?
Туда летит.
А вы видели?
Мы стояли, мы присели.
Ну, мы в доме.
Сейчас машина не прилетит. Саша, сейчас горит машина, ведь она сует. Там багажник и палитра есть. Надо, чуть дальше надо идти куда-то. Сейчас машина не.
So yet another nice big ammunition depot which has been destroyed by Ukrainian forces. Let's move over here into Zaporizhzhia. Zaporizhzhia was just recently hit by a large number, at this point they're saying roughly 9 strikes at this point, of S-300 missiles, which are actually surface-to-air missiles, which were converted to hit surface targets just, yesterday. And what we're seeing is that it was once again struck tonight. And so at this point, the death toll is up to 19. That is likely going to be increasing. So this is what we're seeing from the strikes from yesterday and on the 6th. And we're seeing, pictures of, paintings are still hanging on the wall, in some of these collapsed buildings. But this is coming from tonight. This is coming from Paul Massaro, who is there he's with the Associated Press. He's a foreign policy reporter there, and he is in Zaporizhzhia and was able to snap these photos. This is of the strike tonight. Very obviously, this is yet another high-rise apartment building which has been struck. You can see entire sections of this building have completely collapsed. This is only getting reported not but a couple hours ago at this point. So we're seeing quite a lot of devastation from the strikes tonight. Unfortunately, we do not know the extent of this information. It looks like there's actually someone else who has actually posted more information on this. So this is coming from that site tonight as well. So take a look.
Вот, короче, ёбаные русские уничтожили дом. Ночью, в 2 часа ночи. Тупо многоэтажку уничтожили. Ёбаные твари, блядь. Вот.
Я поняла, что только что. Я поняла, что только что.
You can see in these photos just the amount of devastation that occurred here. Once again, we do not know the number of deaths. This individual is reporting 10 to 15 missile strikes at this point. We do not know the number of wounded or dead. This information is way too new to have any semblance of what's happening on the ground outside of the initial photos of the destruction and the rescue efforts, and going through that debris is going to take some time. But we don't know any casualties or the extent of casualties, considering these are mostly apartment buildings that are being hit. That is definitely likely that there are pretty significant casualties. Once again, only about 2 hours ago, hour and a half ago, Zaporizhzhia was just struck with additional missiles tonight, and we do not have any further information, but the devastation is quite significant there in downtown Zaporizhzhia. And Hadar nuclear facility here, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant specifically. Down here, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant once again is resorting to its diesel generators as the last bit of power was cut and renewed shelling at the plant. The last power line was cut, which requires cooling to avoid a meltdown, forcing it to resort to its emergency generators. The Enatom head, Petrol Kotin, said that diesel generators have a limited supply of fuel. If the generators run out of fuel, after that, they will stop and there will be a disaster, Kotin said. The Director General of the IAEA, or the International Atomic Energy Agency, stated, quote, the resumption of direct shelling hitting the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, sole source of external power, is tremendously irresponsible, and the ZMPP must be protected. And that's coming from Rafael Mariano Grossi, who is the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Also being reported by, of course, the Kiev Independent. Heavy fighting is taking place there in the Kherson Oblast. We do see that fighting is continuing. And we actually have some first-person footage here from the Kherson Oblast from that counteroffensive. So take a look. This is a short video of a firefight ongoing there in this portion in the Kherson area here today. Take a look.
Есть аптечка, есть!
Ай, блядь.
Бери аптечку!
Лежи, не дергайся.
Сильно кажу!
Сейчас, увидишь.
Lots of pressing fire there. Obviously, there was at least one person that would appear to have been wounded. Up here in the Mykolaiv Oblast, a Shahed 136, which is an Iranian-made kamikaze drone, was reportedly shot down by Ukrainian forces in the Mykolaiv Oblast using an NSV 12.7 by 108 millimeter Utios heavy machine gun, which is a similar. It's basically the Russian version of the M2 50 caliber machine gun that was produced by the United States, also known as the Browning M2 or the Ma Deuce. But take a look. This is what's left of this Shahed 136.
Сбили шахед 136-й, ударный беспилотник. Вот его двигатель. Только-только засыпали песком, еще дымится все. Вот микросхемы, электроника, мозг, крылья.
So that is the remnants of a Shahed 136. And now, the moment that everyone has been waiting for, the KERCH Bridge, aka the Crimean Bridge. The Crimean Bridge is a bridge built by the Russian Federation post-2014 and their occupation of Crimea. And it is something that back in August, the Ukrainians said that they would be, that they were going to strike this thing. Well, it's happened. So this thing, they collapsed it entirely. And it's known, it was severely damaged as of this morning. It was actually at sunrise here in Ukraine. It was about 5 minutes after we actually ended the stream last night that this news broke. to the world, and that the images were coming out to the world only about 5 minutes after he ended the stream last night, which made me really kick myself because I didn't talk just a little bit longer. But it collapsed a section of their motorway, and it also hit the shrapnel from this appears to have pierced several tankers that were, rail tankers on the railroad. There is two technically bridges that run this. You can see right here, this section is the railway section, and then you have the motor vehicle section here. This is the section that collapsed, and this over here is where these tankers were. They appear to have been pierced and were raging in a fire that create quite a nice bit of smoke there. But here's the moment of explosion. So this is being reported. This is coming from the Telegraph here.
В сторону Керчи. Правая полоса в сторону Керчи.
And you can see this stuff raining down here. This is stuff coming. These are hot gases and materials coming out of those tankers that are sitting on that rail line. You can see reportedly several people were killed in this blast. Here's those tankers. They were burning pretty much all day today, and there were firefighting efforts ongoing, if you want to call it that. They mostly waited for it to burn out, but take a look. And you can see those rail tankers there, and that complete section of bridge, which is collapsed. That's coming from the Kiev Independent. Here's the bridge, of course, burning. Several nice photos. You can see up close and personal kind of just how the ferocity of these fires. These are very flammable materials in these tankers, most likely fuel being transported into Crimea for the war effort. And you can see the entire section of this roadway has completely collapsed. So this is also damaged roadway here. You can see some pretty severe damage down on this section, probably closer towards where the detonation actually occurred. And you see that nice toasty fire early this morning. Gave everyone so much joy. And of course, what's left of the bridge after the firefighting efforts took place. Now, I had a question earlier. Let's see if I can find it again here. Ed Kelly asked me my opinion on what blew up the bridge in Crimea. So, based off of the video of the detonations that we have available to us, and yes, the rail traffic did partially continue on this. So, my opinion on a bridge collapsing. So, modern warfare is impressive in its scope and its ability to be efficient in killing each other. And about the one thing left that we're better at than killing each other as a species is actually building bridges. Bridges are inherently very difficult to actually collapse. In fact, look how many times Ukraine has actually hit, using HIMARS, has hit the bridge across the has hit the Antonovsky Bridge and also hit Novokakhovka. And these bridges are, to say the least, probably a little bit less. I mean, they're older bridges than this is. This is going to have a little bit better engineering, and I'd say, and it's a much larger bridge, and it has to be built considering it's covering the expanse of the Kerch Strait. It has to stand up against forces that, say, the Antonovsky Bridge probably wouldn't. And the Antonovsky Bridge has not completely collapsed. It's severely damaged. It is no longer viable as an actual tool to be used. But we haven't seen it collapse. No matter how many times Ukraine has struck it, it's punching holes through it. It's not really collapsing it. Another video of some of the damage here. But it's not really collapsed it. So what I think has occurred here, and yes, it's down to it's one-way roads. It's one-way traffic for both sides. Motor vehicle wise, they did do a test of like 15 vehicles across the bridge. And people are trying to escape out of Crimea right now. So they are really running, and they're also buying up as much supplies as physically possible if they're staying. So it takes a significant amount of firepower to actually collapse a bridge. And on top of that, there's also an accuracy issue. So even with precision guided munitions, it can be very difficult to strike something such as a bridge and hit it in the right spot to do significant damage to it. So what we're really left with is shape charges and precisely placed charges. And these are videos of people leaving out of Crimea right now. So what we're left with is really shape charges and placing of these charges. Now, or a very, very, very massive amount of explosives in a single area. So that really boils it down to one of two things. Either a vehicle which has been laden with explosives crossing the bridge, as has been really stated by several different sources. We've seen that, where they have stated that there was a semi which detonated on the bridge. Based off of the detonation itself, I do not believe that that is true. The detonation really seems to come up and out, as opposed to starting at kind of a higher level. And most explosions, the way that they work, is an explosion usually goes up and out. This is why ducking when a grenade goes off is actually fairly safe, as long as you're outside of the blast radius. These explosions, they shoot shrapnel and everything else up and out. So you might get a nice crater and it might do a little bit of damage to the roadway, but it's not going to collapse it in several different sections like that. It's just not going to have enough power, and there's just not going to be enough downward force to really do something like that to the bridge. So that leaves you with only one other thing, and that's really, what many people are suspecting: sabotage, shape chargings. It's very possible that even with we've seen how the Russian military has really kept up this image, or tried to keep up the image of its very strong and powerful military force, and that it maintains it's advertised extremely well that it's putting a lot of protection forces in around the KERCH bridge, the Crimean bridge, and it's bolstered its air defense forces and stuff to make it nigh impenetrable. You can see those barges that they put out there to try and disorient different missiles. And I can totally see them collapsing this entire bridge section, no problem, by pushing in some guys in there under the cover of darkness. And they would set up everything, with shape charges and everything, and just load up the pylon on this bridge. And essentially, these shape charges would be used to... shape charges work by diverting energy into basically a single point to really cut through something, as opposed to exploding and just causing a whole bunch of, a nice big fireball and smoke and everything. It's meant to really cut through something, and what you want is you need something to cut through the pylons and make them no longer stable to support the weight of the bridge, which is perfect for a shape charge. So putting shape charges underneath this bridge, mining it properly, and then detonating it, really gives you that kind of level of devastation that we're seeing today. It's not a whole lot. It's not really a whole lot of a whole lot else. So, there's not a whole lot else that really causes that level of devastation. So, in my opinion, right, I believe that this bridge was properly mined by probably Ukrainian special forces that went in there. They set up shape charges on the bridge. They detonated the bridge after they got a certain distance away, or they had timers on that bridge. It detonated, it caused it destroyed the pylon and made it unstable, and it could no longer support the weight of the bridge itself. Big boom boom then turned into collapsing bridge. The what was left, the shrapnel that was piercing off of the that was coming off of what was left of the bridge, impacted the tankers that happened to be going off next to it, and therefore it ended up peppering it with shrapnel, red hot shrapnel, and then it ignited a fire, causing a major fire in the tankers, which is what we see today. Now, PB says that the pylons are not damaged. That's where you're wrong. The pylons are damaged. It just doesn't. So the way a shape charge works is it directs the force of the blast into a certain direction. Is how it works. So you can create shape charges that do all sorts of things. You can create shape charges that, this is something that I teach you if you go to a breacher's course, you can make shape charges that will cut through a wall, that will cut through a door, that will cut through basically whatever you want. They cut through wire, they cut through all sorts of things. You can make explosive charges do things that you wouldn't think explosive charges can do. It's a science. It's very, very cool to watch them do it. But that's how they create breaching charges and stuff like that. It's a shape charge that's designed to force the energy of the blast to create a certain shape or a certain effect that you would like that charge to do. So while you may not see this entire pylon be blasted apart like it's like someone bit down on like a Tootsie Pop or something, what it's going to look like is it's going to look pretty sheer across the top of it, where it sheared off really the supports that connected the bridge to the type of the pylon. Ed Kelly says, thanks. Did you see the one video in slow motion that showed something protrude out under the bridge a split second before the explosion? I did not, but we have the explosion from different perspectives here. So let's take a look.
А мне кажется, вообще два взрыва было, нет?
Просто если бы это была ракета...
Называется. Оно, блядь, развалилось. Пролет упал. Но я посмотрю, не могу связаться и включить сторону.
A blast.
And that one's coming from Reuters. You said it's right in the beginning. Oh, that was the right video. Are you talking about the very first video of the explosion?
Yes.
Let's see here. If we can get a fine enough. I'm not seeing anything that ends up protruding out through the... I just see a detonation of the bridge. Sorry if anyone... I'm not trying to give anyone epilepsy. I apologize. Oh, no, the one I just showed. Oh, okay, hold on. Go back. There's so many videos of this bridge. Let's see if we can get a good... Talking about that little thing right there. There's like a little black speck right there. It's a little difficult to see. Huh. Well, you can kind of, I don't know if that's just me, but there's kind of looks like there's something there. I don't know if this is just like the camera angle. There's some good frame by frame from 2 cams. It's not the truck. No, it's not the truck. That's what I'm saying. The truck, it may have an immense amount of explosives. You know, that truck could carry an immense amount of explosives, but I don't think it's the truck. You know, I don't think it's the truck. I think it's a shape charge. Now, I do see something that pops up here, and I don't know if this is based off of like the camera angle because of there's a little bit of a yeah, so you can see, so there's a couple of different things here. So there's like a little dot here, and then you can see there's a wave that comes in right here. Now, I'm no like professional analyst. Like I don't sabotage things for like a living. Like I blew up tanks. And so you can see in the water where there's a wave that comes in. Now, there has been some speculation as to what this could have been. But something that's good to point out here is that when it detonates, so we have the wave come in and then a detonation. When the detonation starts to clear, you can see the smoke billowing out from underneath this, underneath the bridge, which usually indicates an explosion on the bottom side of the bridge. Once again, explosions are going to go up and out. Not saying smoke can't like linger underneath it based off of how the wind's probably blowing across the strait, but it's, you know, it's going to get trapped by the bridge itself. So it's a really good indicator that there's probably an explosion underneath the bridge at some point. You can see that that fire is catching. And you can see what's left of that bridge there after it's detonated, with the section completely collapsed. Now, if I can find that photo. Retaliation excuse is what they're saying. Let's take a look what this guy shows. That doesn't show the pylon very well. I want to take a look at the pylon. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying to find a good photo of what's left of this bridge so we can see the pylon itself. Yeah, there we go. So let's see if we can zoom in on this picture at all. I'm going to guess and say no. So here's kind of what I'm talking about right here. So you can see over on this right hand side where there's a connecting point. It might be difficult for you to see it if you are watching. But if you take a look here, there's connecting points onto the bridge to this pylon right here on the bottom side. You can see a nice big white chunk there where this section of the bridge is connected to the pylon itself. On this left-hand side, the pylon is sheared. And it's a very clean shear across. It's pretty level across the top, which can happen a couple of different ways from my understanding. One of that could be the force of the blast lifting up the bridge and actually shearing it off, as the stress points on that section would be very similar. But it's also several sections of this bridge which have also completely collapsed because there's another section there. So that could indicate that this could have been sheared off with with a shape charge that would basically cut through that line of supports, and basically that would have rendered this unstable. Bridge is no longer being supported by the pylon itself, and the force of the blast now at that point causes it to collapse because there's no stability there in that section of the bridge. And that would also explain why this would be left relatively untouched. Now, once again, I'm not an expert in this field, but if I had to guess, I would say it's a very, very well done, very, very well done sabotage mission. Now, is that pro-Kremlin rhetoric? No. It's not, because here's the thing. With Ukraine, everyone says, oh, this is they sabotaged a very important, vital, civilian infrastructure here. This is a valid military target by just about every treaty you could possibly read, and the International Committee of the Red Cross actually maintains a database that defines and has all the definitions of every treaty in the world of what each country and what the international conventions and customary international humanitarian law considered a valid military target. And this actually falls under a valid infrastructure military target. And we also can validate that after seeing so many videos of military hardware crossing this bridge. And therefore, under pretty much every single definition you can find, this bridge is a valid military target in this war. And it's a war between Ukraine and Russia. Technically, that means anything in Russia is also a valid military target. However, Ukraine is not looking to hit targets in Russia. They're looking to hit targets in Ukraine. Something very interesting to note is this section of the bridge is in Ukraine. This is in Ukrainian waters. So, this is a valid military infrastructure target with major benefits if destroyed and successfully taken out or degraded. Therefore, yes, it is a valid military target to destroy. Therefore, sabotage is on the table 100%. And so even if Ukrainians or whoever, doesn't matter, damaging or destroying this bridge benefits the Ukrainians in a way that creates a valid military target out of this piece of infrastructure. And therefore, it is fair game for Ukrainians to sabotage the hell out of it. I don't care if they completely blow this bridge entirely. And Sci-Fi says, and that's a military fuel train. Yeah, probably. It probably is a military fuel train. Because it's about the only thing going into Ukraine is military equipment. People are not going into Ukraine for tourism right now. They're not. So yes, it's a valid military target. And so that is the situation regarding the KERCH Bridge. The KERCH Bridge, now there are ferries that are moving here across the KERCH Strait. There is that other section of roadway was tested with 15 cars. That's a really, really significant test, everybody, to make sure that it can still support vehicle traffic. So there is one-way vehicle traffic on the bridge right now. And they have cleared the destroyed trains. They finally burned out, and they are testing and making sure that train traffic, they're expecting it to be able to resume tomorrow. So, yes. So there is an entire... But it is significantly degraded, I should say. And it sends a signal. Sometimes not everything in war is about absolutely demolishing your enemy. Sometimes sending a signal is enough. And the signal, I think, has been received by about everybody. The KERCH Bridge, the Crimean Bridge, something that's so heavily guarded and talked about, by the Russians, and how that they could never touch this so vital piece of roadway and networking that connects Russia with Crimea, has been violated and destroyed. And, well, not destroyed, but severely damaged. In the Russian eyes, this is no longer untouchable, as was perceived. The Ukrainians have pierced that reality. And now, in order to create a better security situation, Russia would require to dedicate more equipment and more troops to the KERCH Bridge instead of dedicating them to the front. And they're not going to send their conscripts to protect this. They're going to want actually good military forces in this area, reliable military forces. Arch Instinct says it'd help more if the rail line was completely out of action. It would have. And here's the thing. With military infrastructure and achieving goals, you have to... This is a risky mission. To do what has been done is extremely risky. It's extremely risky, militarily speaking. And so this is, you know, so even this, what has been done, it was a big risk on the Ukrainian troops' parts to have done an operation like this. And I think it's pretty safe to say that they did this. I mean, there's not a whole lot of other groups that are going to do this actively without putting themselves at risk of going into direct conflict. And so there's a lot of risk involved to do it, period. And you have to do something obtainable. The rail bridge has a much more significant height. There's a lot of, I mean, this is still very open water. It's very shallow in the Kerch Strait as well, meaning that you're not going to be, you know, there's not a lot of wiggle room. And so it's very difficult to maintain a Cobra operation trying to pass through here with divers or with like a tactical submarine, you know, for like you see the Navy SEALs using, you know, a personal, personal underwater vehicle essentially. So there's not a lot of things that you can do here that don't leave it open and don't incur a lot of risk of either detection or just overall mission failure. So the fact that it was done at all is impressive, and I think it once again, I think that the signal is important enough. I don't think, while could we sit here an armchair general of, well, you know, you could have completely destroyed the bridge. Well, yeah, I guess you could have, but would it have been worth the risk overall? And now you have to remember that now there's a lot of people that are trying to come out of Crimea, and there's a one-way road. And this thing is in range of HIMARS. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that could be done here. And now the Russians have to navigate through a huge blockage of civilian vehicles. And they have to do so under HIMARS range, you know, within HIMARS range. And they also are now limited to one lane. And, you know, what are you going to do? You know, it's funneling. It makes it more difficult. It puts more stress on Russian logistics. And you can always hit it again. You did it once, you can do it again. So, is it that important that they didn't completely knock it out of action? I don't think so. Would it have been great to do so the first time? Yeah, of course, but you know, it definitely does not put anyone in a good light, that's for sure. And then you can target the backlogs and weak points. Exactly. And once again, you're degrading the already stressed Russian logistical capacity for war. You have to remember, Russian logistics already had an issue. Then they started blowing up their ammunition depots and logistical hubs. And now they're blowing up bridges. So, war is won or lost based on logistics and economies. You know, you can win the first battle as you go across the bridge. You know, you can win the first battle with the ammunition you have on hand, but after that battle is over, you're not going to survive the counterattack, and because you don't have anything left to fight with. And that's really what we're seeing. And so Russian logistics already poor to begin with, only getting worse. They're adding more troops into the fray, which only makes those logistics even more stressed. And now their main bridge has been destroyed, which really inhibits their ability to push equipment and reinforcements and supplies across the bridge and into, say, the Kherson area, which is already cut off on the Dnipro River. And then on top of this, there's a lot of stuff. On top of this is also you have to dedicate more troops into this area. Actually good troops, not conscripts, into this area to try and protect it. There's still a port of KERCH and Crim. Both have a rail terminal connecting the ship terminal and ferry. Strike on those will increase pressure on the KERCH bridge, weakening the structure further. Yes. Yes, so the ports here are definitely being utilized. We know it's been utilized. Now, there was a backlog of ships here as they were not going through the KERCH area, and that actually goes right through where they enter and exit. So they didn't move through here, but it's so there was a backlog of ships. But yes, there is a port, and it can be done. It doesn't make it necessarily optimal, and once again, civilians are also using that port. So civilians are now fleeing out of Crimea in mass, in quite a significant number once again. And so that's going to bog down Russian logistics as well. And really a similar case to what they were originally doing, that hybrid warfare that we're talking about, we're now kind of seeing being played into against the Russians at this point, which is pretty impressive to watch. Arch instinct, Russian logistics rely more on rail lines than trucks, though. Standard Russian logistics companies for BTG don't have enough trucks for the logistics at the beginning of the war. That is true. They only had about 2/3 of the actual logistical capabilities needed to actually field the amount of BTGs that they sent into combat. Which they needed about 6,000 logistical vehicles. They only had about 4,500 of them. So yes, that is 100% true. They rely on what's called push logistics. Push logistics means you get the equipment whether or not you want it, which is originally intended as a type of logistics that was intended and developed by the Russians. So that way, standard ground forces could still operate in a nuclear, chemical, biological, or radioactive environment should a nuclear war have been carried out during the Cold War. Now, it's great if it's a nuclear strike and you're having to fight a war in the wasteland. Like, push logistics is fantastic. This isn't a nuclear radioactive wasteland. We're not playing the game Fallout here, which means push logistics is terrible, and it means that there's a backlog of equipment that isn't really necessary in the country, and it really strains the Russian logistical lines to begin with. And on top of that, that's why you're seeing such huge amounts of ammunition also being captured, by the way. It's because they're getting it even if they don't need it. And that creates stress on logistical vehicles, and you're also seeing those logistics hubs being destroyed. But you're also seeing, once again, like we saw down here and in Drivka, where they are targeting rail capacity. Basically anything logistically is fair game, and this while it did not destroy, it did damage the tracks, and so it takes time to repair that, and there's a lot of rail traffic that comes across the KERCH bridge, so it's at least a short reprieve logistically, and it's something that they could look at conducting a strike into the future. Just because it was a risky move the first time doesn't mean they won't attempt again. I'm not saying that they won't attempt again, because cutting this off is pretty vital to the war. It's just a matter. It's a matter of if, not, or it's a matter of when, not an if, I think. The fire was so good because it had rendered the rail line inoperable. It would have probably have been ended the war for the Vatics right then. Yes, likely. You could see the destruction of that rail line ending the war pretty quickly, at least the war in the south. Now, do I think that the war is going to end by them pushing through Kherson and into the south? No, that's not my personal opinion on that. And I don't think that the destruction of the KERCH bridge is, I don't think that is the end of the war. I think that's the end of the war in the south, but you still have quite an extensive land border here with Russia, with the Donetsk and Luhansk Oblasts. And so we'll probably see the fighting really continue in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions for quite some time before the war really draws to a close. Will be the final bastion for the Russians. This is a matter of time before it collapses. This is the final bastion for the Russians, I think, because of that land border and because they can just continue to supply it without the tactical and strategic bottleneck here of the Kerch Bridge really bogging down their capacity to ship supplies into the front. They have a lot more ability to do that here and have a lot more ways of doing it. Arch Instinct said they probably can't do it in the same way. The movement of the Russian Navy is likely to provide additional security for Kerch now, since they can't attack Odessa with those ships. Yes, depending on where it's at. Now, a lot of the ships did already leave Sevastopol, so it could be that these ships were already kind of in the south part of the and probably already were getting redirected over into this area to begin with. But that's not something we can directly confirm. But yeah, I can see the Navy probably conducting more patrols in and around the Kerch Strait. It depends on the ships, though. Once again, this is a very shallow section of water. So if it runs deep, so if the ships run deep, it may not work. They'll have to use smaller patrol vessels. But yeah, so that's the situation regarding the Kerch Bridge. Quite an extensive situation. But with that, that's actually everything inside of Ukraine. So we're actually going to move on to the international news. Don't worry, there's other stuff regarding Ukraine in the international news too. As we jump up here and into Moscow, actually, we have a follow-up. So if you remember yesterday, there were 3 winners of the Nobel Peace Prize. One of them was actually a Russian non-governmental organization that was very open about what they were doing. Definitely were not backing the Russians there, but the Russian judiciary orders the confiscation of the offices of the NGO Memorial, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, just mere hours after winning the Nobel Peace Prize, along with Belarusian activist and a Ukrainian NGO. And we actually see this coming. This is coming from the Span Chronicles. We also see this from Irish Today. So they won the Nobel Peace Prize, and the Russian authorities immediately closed down their offices and confiscated everything. Think about that. Winner of the Nobel Peace Prize immediately suppressed by the government. Immediately suppressed by their government. Wins one of the most prestigious awards that anybody can be awarded. Immediately shut down by the government. If that does not tell you the Russian ideology in this war, I don't know what would. You don't get to independently think in Russia. Arch Instinct says, I hear about the Nobel Prizes. Weren't Ukrainians offended being lumped together with Russia and Belarus? It really depends on the Ukrainian. See, the individuals, and so not so much. We actually have a Ukrainian on staff, and so that's something that we actually asked. And so, yeah, so that the reactions are kind of mixed. The thing is that the NGOs in Belarus and in Russia are just that. They're NGOs. They're not really backing this war at all. Look, one of them they literally got their stuff confiscated today by the Russian authorities, which obviously tells you they don't back the war. They probably very openly are probably against the war. And the guy in Belarus is under arrest by Lukashenko. He's detained by his government. He's a political prisoner in Belarus. So, yes, if I can understand. You have to understand these people had their country invaded and their families are being massacred, quite literally. So, do they probably have very great feelings about what's happening? Do they have great feelings about the Russian people? I wouldn't. If I was in their shoes, I wouldn't. I wouldn't like anybody. And that's, is it right? Probably not. But is it a feeling? Yeah. Is it understandable? 100%. But that's probably where some of those mixed feelings are. Is I wouldn't like Belarus. They invaded my country from Belarus. Russia, they're invading my country right now. They're killing my family. No, I wouldn't like to be associated with them. But at the same token, these people are against the war and they're against the governments there, and their NGOs. They're not helping with the situation. They're not helping and pushing for the situation ongoing in Ukraine. So yeah, I wouldn't mind that. And so I think that's where the mixed feelings really are. Of yes, they're from Belarus. Yes, they're Russian, but they're against what's happening in Ukraine, and I think that's where the mixed feelings are. So it doesn't necessarily make some of that right, no, but it definitely, I understand where those mixed reviews come from. So, but that's fine. I just, once again, I don't think that you should get the Nobel Peace Prize and immediately be arrested by your government. Or I don't think you should get the Nobel Peace Prize and still be arrested by your government. That tells you what your government is okay with. That tells you what your government is doing and what their ideology is. And it's usually not good if the whole world gives you a Nobel Peace Prize. Over here in Ireland, 10 people are dead after an explosion at a gas station. 4 men and 3 women, a teenage boy, a teenage girl, and a 5-year-old girl died at a petrol station explosion in Creeslow, Ireland on 10/7. Police reported that they are not expecting more deaths as all currently reported missing personnel have been accounted for. The incident is currently deemed to be an accident. And Cleesborough is a small village about 30 miles from the border of Northern Ireland, has a population of only about 400 people. Looks like this is coming from The Independent if you guys want to watch a video on that. And Arch Sync says I didn't get to see the report. No. It's not like an official report. It's just we have a Ukrainian on staff. We have a Ukrainian national on staff who actually helps us with our research. She's in charge of research and advisory, and she's also our translator for both Russian and Ukrainian. And we asked her the situation regarding what she was hearing from, other nationals on the situation with the Nobel Peace Prize. It wasn't like an official report. So just hey, what are you hearing from, other Ukrainians? What's the heads up on it? What do they think? So moving down here and into the Middle East, we jump down here into Syria, where the SDF and the U.S. forces detained an Islamic State militant. In the northern Syria, during a counterterrorism operation, the fighters of the Syrian Democratic Forces, or the SDF, with the support of the U.S. Armed Forces, detained an Islamic State militant. The operation took place near Raqqa, and according to the Arab Kurdish forces, the detained jihadist was engaged in logistical support for the Islamic State cells and their financing. During the search of the militant's house, security forces found propaganda materials, money, communications equipment, and fake IDs. And that's pretty common, actually. So in Syria, that's actually pretty common. Most of the Islamic State militants that are actually captured aren't active fighters necessarily. A lot of what we see, especially in areas controlled by the SDF, is less active fighters. They're very small cells of active Islamic State fighters. It's mostly individuals that are reporting American positions and they're reporting positions of the SDF and Americans, and there are also a lot of logistics. So they're funneling weapons to the actual weapons and munitions, and burying stuff in the desert, and setting up IEDs and getting IEDs and giving them to the insurgents themselves, or building them. It's not usually a lot of kinetic forces in the area, usually very small cells. It's usually individuals or small groups of individuals doing reconnaissance and logistical work for the Islamic State at this point within the area of northern Syria. So, and that's coming from Deir ez-Zor and Al-Hasaka provinces is really where you're seeing a lot of that. Delta Aviation says at least 17 people killed, 40 wounded as a result of the Russian missile strikes against the Russian drone patrol blocks in Zaporizhzhia overnight. Sweet. Can you, if you can, Delta, somewhere on our Discord, if you could shoot us where you're getting that update, I would be really, really happy to be able to give that update live to make sure there's some kind of confirmation on that. But thank you. Over here in Tehran, protester security forces are clashing, of course, as this continues. Today, another clash between protester security forces took place in Tehran. It is reported that in addition to the Iranian security forces, Arab mercenaries from Hezbollah and other Shiite formations appeared on the streets of the capital, who actively participated in dispersing the protesters. It's worth noting that during the suppression of protesters in Iranian Balochistan, which began on September the 30th, more than 90 civilians have already been killed. It is difficult to say exactly how many citizens have been killed across the country since the beginning of the mass protests.
بیشرف رو بگی بیناموس اون گوشه نگاه اصلا گرفته زد
ما آشغالی هم نگاه وایستاد داره آشغالی رو جمع
تناور هم جمع کرد کوسیش تناور نبرد
داخل رو پشمون امیر
بگی من اینو بگی
هیچ عجب پیگیری اون یارو اشکاور زد
نه با تیر ساچمه ای حروم لقمه
اون گوشه باید وایسن بگیرن بزنن کوسکش مادر از ترسش میبینی چجوری داره میزنه بله تو گاهیده بالا قبل
اونا اینجا اوضاع خیلی برام ریخته است
مشکیه؟
آره
سمد و نگاه با سیگارش میاد پایی
بذار ببینم چی کار میکنه خداحافظ
چقدر این یارو
اون آره اون خیلی بده
اونو باید بگیرن کارشو بگن کوسکش
And so that is the situation there in Iran. We have a couple of different 18 plus things here. But there was a driver of a car that was blaring his horn in support of the protesters, which is something we've seen rather commonly out of this region with support in the protests. He was shot by the Iranian police, essentially, or the Iranian security forces. They shot him through the head in his car on this middle of the street. Jump down here and into Africa, where we jump immediately into Ethiopia, where we're seeing quite an immense amount of atrocities ongoing, and yet another one occurred today as an airstrike hit a family there in the Shire. So an airstrike hit Shire Town, situated to the west, in the west of Tigray, Ethiopia, wounding 4 family members, including a child, a hospital source said. It's the second bombing in 48 hours. On Friday, 6 civilians were killed in a drone strike in Dongalat, 30 kilometers from the capital of Mekelle. We can see where that ended up landing. Kind of gives you a layout of where this is ongoing. But there is quite a significant issue with humanitarian aid within this region. In fact, 90% of the people within the Tigray region of Ethiopia require humanitarian aid for survival. At this point, there's also reports of ethnic cleansing ongoing by both Eritrean and the Ethiopian troops within the Tigray region during this fighting. So it's a rather horrible situation there in Tigray, Ethiopia. So we move over here into Nigeria. At least 10 people are dead after a boat capsized. 10 people have died. Another 60 are missing after a boat capsized in Nigeria's southeastern Anambra state. The vessel, with 85 people on board, capsized amid heavy flooding, which trapped the passengers. Anambra State Governor Chukwuma Charles Soludo said in a statement that 10 people had drowned. The head of the Anambra State Emergency Management Agency said 15 people have been rescued as of Saturday evening. Jumping across the Atlantic here and over to Nicaragua, where it currently is projected that a tropical storm is forecasted to land there in Nicaragua. According to NOAA and the Air Force Reserve Reconnaissance Aircraft indicated that at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Julia has become a hurricane as it passes near San Andres and Providencia Islands. It is expected to reach the coast of Nicaragua tonight. Flash flooding and mudslides expected to cross parts of Central America this weekend. This is the National Hurricane Center in the Atlantic reporting on that. Maximum wind speeds at this point. So maximum sustained wind speeds at this point are 75 miles per hour or 120 kilometers per hour. Movement present west or 120 or 270 degrees at 17 miles per hour, 28 kilometers an hour. Minimum central pressure 990 MB or 29.23 inches at this point. So this is coming from the National Hurricane Center. We can see that feed as it's currently rolling across the Caribbean right now, getting ready to impact Central America. Once again, expected to make landfall there in Nicaragua. This is the projected path if you are living in Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, or northern Costa Rica. I highly recommend seeking shelter or getting to a safer place. Once again, these storms also usually kick up a storm surge within this region. I also highly encourage you, if you live outside this projected cone of wind speed probabilities, but also seeking shelter or finding a more stable area, as these paths, as we saw with Hurricane Ian, are predictions. They aren't necessarily facts, and we do see that the storms can change on a dime in some cases, kind of moving in whatever way they please. No one controls Mother Nature, and her fury is unmatched by anything within human capacity. There are warnings coming from NOAA regarding this. They are giving currently a hurricane warning here on the coast of Nicaragua, tropical storm warnings across most of the coast, and a tropical storm watch over there in the south, looks like southeastern part of Honduras along the coast. If you would like more information, I always recommend that you go here and check out. This is the National Hurricane Center and Central Pacific Hurricane Center, which I actually reference every day, and it gives a lot of good information. But I reference that every day for work, so highly recommend. As we jump over here, back over into Europe, we start rolling into kind of the interesting news of the night, trying to end the news on a nice uplifting note here. And we see excessive artificial light at night can disorient birds, and light pollution contributes to the death of millions of them annually due to collisions. And that information is coming out. And today was World Migratory Bird Day, which was initiated in 2006 by the Secretariat of the Agreement of Conservation of African Eurasian Migratory Water Birds, or AEWA, in collaboration with the Secretary of the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals, or the CMS. On Saturday's World Migratory Bird Day, every day, dim the lights for the birds at night. So this is coming from World Migratory Bird Day. It's kind of a cool little video there for you. TUCC there regarding that. And also bond conservation. If you would like more info, there's even more that we have there, including a statement coming from Antonio Gutierrez, who is the head of the United Nations. He's Secretary General of the United Nations. Well, we're here into Hawaii, but it's truly an international team as TESS discovers an old, warm, Jupiter-like exoplanet. Using the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, or TESS, an international team of astronomers has detected a new, old, and warm Jupiter-like alien world orbiting the G dwarf star. Newfound exoplanet designated TOI 5542b is a little bigger than Jupiter. The newfound exoplanet has a radius of approximately 1.01 Jupiter radii and a mass of 1.32 Jupiter masses, which yields a density at a level of 1.6 grams per centimeter cubed. It orbits its parent star every 75.12 days at a distance of about 33 AU from it. The planet's equilibrium temperature was estimated at 441 Kelvin, and therefore astronomers classified it as warm Jupiter. There you go. That is them finding the planet. This is a lot more science than what I am capable of. But if you would like more information on that, you can go to phys.org, or you can go to arziv.org as well. Follow up with that. They'll probably be able to explain that a lot better than I can. I apologize. I may be interested, but once again, that does not make me an expert in any of this. But with that, I hope that everyone has found at least this knowledgeable, if not, kind of cool or uplifting. But I hope that you found this knowledgeable and that you kind of enjoyed how we do things here. Once again, 100% of everything that we do here is for charity. And so please, I implore you, as we wrap up tonight, to please check out the video description below and check out all of those organizations. 100% of everything we do is charity. We're never doing super chats or merchandising or any kind of that stuff here. We're never going to be monetizing these just because we want to raise money to help people and be the news that gives back. We want to be able to give back to the various situations that are ongoing throughout the world. And with that, I hope that you guys, once again, found this knowledgeable. I hope that you guys learned something from this. And if you guys can't give a lot to these organizations, please give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's perfectly okay too. I hope that you guys will be able to help us grow this thing, share it with your friends and family and communities. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, follow us on Twitter, and share our stuff on there. And with that, I hope that you guys will be back once again to join us on Monday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time and 9 p.m. Central for a 48 hours worth of news and review. My name is Paul from the New News. I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe. And if not, I hope you find that safety and security in the very near future. In the meantime, we'll hope to see you Monday. I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful Sunday, restful Sunday, a wonderful day there on Monday. A nice start to your week, and we'll see you on Monday night. Have a good one, everybody.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стояду вам на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шверхуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять довом на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять довом на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkle bomb. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull. Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять довом на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять довом на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять довом на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять довом на ваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Ідіть нахуй!